Hello and welcome to StudyIQ. In the previous lectures, we have learned about the microeconomics, inflation, poverty, and this is the fourth module, unemployment. Modules like poverty, unemployment, etc., which covers the social issues of India, are very important from all examination point of view. The upcoming NABARD exam, the RBI exam, Civil Service Preliminary Examination, everything would be giving more weightages for social issues like poverty, unemployment, etc. So this is a very important module from the upcoming examinations point of view. Let us start. When we say about unemployment, we should understand what is employment first. What is meant by employment? Can we give a clear definition for employment? We can say that a person is employed or he has employment if he or she is working in order to contribute to the national income of a country. So, if he or she works to contribute to the national income, that is to the national income. So, we can say that a person is employed if he or she is working in order to contribute to the national income. So, if a person contributes to the national income, he is employed. Full employment, this can be said as a situation where every person who is willing to work, is able to work. That is, every person who is willing to work is able to work. That means everyone who is willing to work is able to find work or is able to work. In order to say that a person is fully employed, he must satisfy two conditions. The first condition is that he or she should get work for a specified period that he or she wants. Specified time period. That is, he should be able to get work for the specified period for which he is willing to work. And the second condition is that he should get wages according to his skills. Get wages according to skill. If a person finds only employment for 2 or 3 months in a year, but he is willing to work for the entire year, we cannot say that he is fully employed. That means he should be able to find the work for a specified time period for which he is willing to do the work. Then second one, he should get the wages or skill he has. So if an MBA graduate earns only 6,000 rupees per month and that wages is not in proportion to his skills, we cannot say that he is fully employed. So these are the two conditions in order to satisfy full employment in the economy. So first condition, he should be able to find work for a specified period for which he is willing to do the work. And the second one, he should be able to get the wages according to his skills. So if either of these two conditions, that is first one specific time period and second one wages according to the skills. So if any of these two conditions are not satisfied, we call it as underemployment. So full employment means two of these conditions should be satisfied. If any of these two conditions are not satisfied, we call that condition as underemployment in the economy. What is unemployment then? Unemployment means in an economy, people are willing to do the work but they are not able to find the work. Willing but not able to find the work. This condition is known as unemployment in the economy. Now let us see what are the types of unemployment in an economy. Types of unemployment. The first type of unemployment is frictional or functional unemployment. Frictional or functional unemployment. This type of unemployment is mostly voluntary and temporary. So what is functional or frictional unemployment? It is the time gap between leaving one job and finding another one. So it is the time gap between leaving a job and finding another. So this time lag can be for acquiring new skills. So would be for acquiring new skills. So this is a desirable type of unemployment in the economy, that is acquiring new skills and finding new prospects. So this is desirable in the economy. This is desirable and this is good for the personal growth of the individual, good for the personal growth as well as for an economy's growth. When the person acquires new skills, he will be able to find better work, better wages. So that will add on to the national income of the country. So it is good for the economy also. For the person also it is good, and for the economy also it is good. So functional or frictional unemployment is desirable in an economy. Next is structural unemployment. Structural unemployment. Structural unemployment is caused due to a mismatch between the skills required by the industry and the skills possessed by individuals. Skills possessed by the individuals. So it is caused due to a mismatch between skills required by the industry and the skills possessed by the individuals. An example of structural unemployment would be decline of handloom industries. Handloom industry because of the technological revolution. So another example here another example for the structural kind of unemployment or the mismatch between the skills required and the skills possessed would be demonetization. So under demonetization, so during demonetization, what happened was the government was insisting individuals for promoting a cashless economy or less cash economy. So during demonetization, the government insisted on a less cash economy. So under a less cash economy, digitalization was necessary. So under less cash economy, digitalization was necessary, and this digitalization was unaware for many of the Indians. So digitalization was unaware for many of the Indians. So many of the merchants or like small traders or even the bankers did not had enough skills for digitalization. This led to a slowdown in the growth. So this can also be said as a type of structural unemployment. And even when the concept of less cash economy comes into existence, many people will be losing job because now most of the transactions are digitalized. So this can be understood as an example of the structural unemployment in the economy. Next type of unemployment is cyclical unemployment. This is related to the business cycle. In a business cycle, there are boom period. Also there will be recession. During recession, what will happen? During recession, the rate of production or output will come down because there is a lesser demand in the economy. So production and output will come down. This will lead to lesser employment. This will lead to unemployment in the economy. So recession can lead to unemployment. So this is how cyclical unemployment occurs in an economy. This is related to the business cycle. Next is seasonal unemployment. Seasonal unemployment. Seasonal unemployment is connected to agriculture. This happens due to the seasonal nature of production in agriculture. Seasonal nature of production. We will discuss about the agricultural seasons in the module agriculture. Next is an important type of unemployment, that is disguised unemployment. Under disguised unemployment, large number of labor forces available. Labor forces available and they are able to find the work also. But what is the problem? The problem is that the marginal productivity of this labor force is zero. Marginal productivity is zero. How does this happen? Say for example, in a farm there are 10 employees or 10 laborers. The output is 100 units. Even if the number of laborers in the farm goes up to 15 or 20, still the output will remain 100 units. That means the marginal productivity of the farm is zero. So even if the number of employees or the laborers in the farm increases, the marginal productivity remains zero or the output remains the same. In this case, we call it as disguised unemployment. So under disguised unemployment, people are able to find the work, but they will not add to the GDP or not to the productivity. What can be the solutions for disguised unemployment? Disguised unemployment can be solved by providing skill to the laborers. So skill development programs need to be implemented so that they have skill, they are able to find new work, and this new work would provide them with more productivity, more wages. So skill development programs are necessary in an economy, and especially in an economy like India where we have a good demographic dividend, skill development programs are very, very important. And skill development programs can be important from any examination point of view also. We will discuss this later in detail. Now let us see what are the methods to measure the unemployment or employment rate in an economy. So measurement of employment or unemployment rate. Measurement. The first one is labor force participation rate. LFPR, labor force participation rate. What is a labor force? Labor force in an economy is the part of population which is willing and able to work. Willing and able to work. Willing and able to work. The part of the population in an economy which is willing and able to work. So willing, also able to work. That is the labor force. The labor force participation rate, LFPR, equal to the labor force divided by total population into 100. So here the labor force is the part of population which is able to work and also willing to work. Labor force divided by the total population in an economy into 100 will give you labor force participation rate. Next is the worker population ratio. Worker population ratio. The worker population ratio is the number of employed persons divided by the total population into 100. The number of employed persons divided by the total population into 100 will give you worker population ratio. Next is the unemployment rate. Unemployment rate is the number of unemployed persons divided by the labor force into 100. Number of unemployed persons divided by the labor force into 100 will give you the unemployment rate. So here the labor force is the part of the population which is willing to work and able to work. Now let us see what is the occupational structure in India. This is very important from any examination point of view. You must clearly understand what are the sectors of the Indian economy, what is the contribution of each sector to the GDP, the contribution of each sector to the employment rate in the economy. Is it increasing or decreasing? What are the trends in the growth in employment or growth in the GDP? You must clearly understand all these concepts in order to answer questions in the examinations. So this is a very important topic. So let us see what is the occupational structure in India. Occupational structure in India. In India, we have primarily three sectors in the economy, which we will discuss in detail later. The three sectors in the Indian economy are agriculture, industry and the services sector. Sectors: share in employment, share in GDP. Around 50% of Indian population is directly engaged in agriculture and allied activities. But the contribution of agriculture to the GDP is merely 14%. The contribution of industry in the share of employment is around 14 to 15%. Industry contributes around 21% of India's GDP. Services sector provides 34 to 35% of employment in the Indian economy and contributes to 65% of the GDP in India. Now let us analyze this data. Coming to the agriculture. Agricultural sector contributes to around 14% of the GDP, but it engages around 50% of India's workforce. We can see a mismatch here. Mismatch between the share of employment and the contribution to the GDP. What is the reason for this mismatch? The reasons could be the lack of technology, lack of productivity, disguised unemployment, and many other reasons which we will discuss in detail in agriculture module. But here the question is this mismatch desirable in an economy? That is the mismatch between the contribution to the GDP and share in employment. Not at all. This is not at all desirable in an economy. The government should take measures to rectify this mismatch. Coming to the industrial sector. Industrial sector contributes around 21% in GDP and provides employment for the 14 to 15% of the total workforce. There is no greater mismatch in industry. So coming to the services sector. Services sector contributes to 65% of the GDP but contributes only to 34 to 35% of the number of workers or the employees or the labor force. Here also we will see a mismatch between the share in employment and the contribution to the GDP of the economy. In an economy, if a sector contributes more to the GDP, it should be able to contribute more to the percentage of employment it creates also. So here also we will see a greater mismatch. So these two mismatches must be rectified in an economy if the economy has to grow in full potential. Occupational structure in India is a very important topic and questions can be asked from this related topics. It can be either an objective type, even in descriptive type questions, you can add points from the occupational structure of India. Now let us analyze the pre-LPG era and post-LPG era. Growth rate of employment, GDP growth. Let's see. What is the LPG era? That is liberalization, privatization and globalization. The post-reforms and the pre-reforms era. So, in the pre-reforms era, we will see that the average growth rate of employment was 2.7% per annum. If we take a few years prior to the liberalization, privatization and globalization, the average growth rate was 2.7% per annum in the employment. And the GDP growth on an average was 5.8% according to the 7th 5-year plan. So from the 8th 5-year plan we began the reforms. So from the 7th 5-year plan data we understand that the growth rate, GDP growth rate was 5.8% and the employment growth rate was 2.7%. Coming to the post-reform era, immediately after the reforms, that is immediately after adopting the liberalization, privatization and globalization, the rate of employment growth came down to 1.07% per annum. But according to the 8th 5-year plan reports, the rate of GDP growth came up to 6.8%. See here, immediately before the liberalization, privatization and globalization, the growth rate of employment was 2.7% per annum. But the GDP growth rate was merely 5.8%. Coming to the period soon after the adoption of liberalization, privatization and globalization or the reforms, the growth rate in employment came down to 1.07% per annum and the GDP growth rate increased to 6.8%. Here you will see that the growth rate in employment has come down but the GDP growth has gone up. So here also we will find a mismatch between the growth rate of employment and the GDP growth rate. Ideally in an economy, when the GDP increases, it should contribute to the employment rate or to the growth of employment in the economy. This is the ideal condition. But in India, what has happened? The GDP has increased due to the reforms adopted by the economy, but the rate of employment growth came down. This is a very negative indication. And this situation is known as jobless growth in an economy. Jobless growth. Jobless growth is very important. This term is very important from any examination point of view. You must understand what is jobless growth. You must also understand what are the reasons, what are the solutions, and you must understand the trends in the Indian economy regarding the jobless growth. So we will discuss the jobless growth in Indian economy. Jobless growth. The concept of jobless growth in India came up after the LPG reforms of 1991. The reforms or the new economic policy adopted by the government after 1991. The idea of jobless growth came into India. Jobless growth means that there is an increased contribution of the GDP in the economy, but there is a decreased employment growth in the economy. So jobless growth is a situation where the GDP of the economy is increasing, but there has been a decrease in the employment rate in the economy. Ideally in an economy, when the GDP grows, it should reduce the unemployment rate. But in case of India, we have seen that it has reduced the rate of growth in employment. Ideally, it should reduce the unemployment rate. Let us analyze what are the reasons for the jobless growth in India. Reasons for jobless growth in India. We are discussing the reasons from the Indian context. So the first reason for jobless growth in India was the decrease in the government expenditure. Due to the balance of payment crisis in 1991, the government reduced the expenditure on the public. The government adopted contractionary fiscal policies. So the contractionary fiscal policies led to a decrease in the public expenditure by the government. Public expenditure can be for the creation of jobs or for providing skills to the labor force, etc. So, when the government reduced these expenditures, India experienced a jobless growth. Again, in the year 2004-05, in the financial year 2004-05, we will see that the government increased expenditures on job creation. That is, the government provided for various schemes for the development of skills, for job creation, for MSMEs, for increasing the production, etc. During those periods, we have seen that the employment rate in the economy also came up. From this, we can conclude that in India, the government expenditure and job creation, employment creation are interconnected. That is, when the government spends more on job creation, there will be more job in the economy, or the employment rate in the economy goes up, and when the expenditure from the side of the government comes down on job creation or skill development, the employment rate also comes down. So the economy is highly dependent on the government expenditure for job creation in the economy. The second reason for jobless growth in India is that the growth of the labor force is more than growth in job. Who is labor force? Labor force is the part of the population who are willing to do the work and able to do the work. So, the growth of the labor force is more than the jobs created in the economy. That means the supply is more than the demand. So, the demand for job is less in the economy, but the supply for job is more in the economy. This can lead to unemployment in the economy and jobless growth in the economy. The reason is the demographic dividend of the country. The younger labor force in the country is increasing more and more. So the demographic dividend or the working population in the country is increasing year by year. So this is another reason for jobless growth in India. If the demographic dividend of the country, that is the working age population 15 to 40 years, is properly utilized, the economy will grow into its full potential. The demographic dividend of a country is a blessing for a country. So it is a positive aspect for any economy. But proper utilization of this demographic dividend must be ensured from the part of the government in order to ensure proper growth of the economy. For example, if we take the examples of East and East Asian countries, their demographic dividend has worked as a miracle for their growth. What can be done in order to utilize this demographic dividend of a country? The government should provide education, health, skill, etc. to this working age population. So, providing education, health and skills will lead to improved employment rates in the economy, which will contribute more to the GDP of the economy. The third reason was decrease in labor force participation. Labor force participation. It means that lesser number of people looking for a job. Lesser number of people looking for job. What are the reasons for this? The first reason was higher enrollment rate. The second reason was an increase in the household income of the individual. The third one was mechanization of agriculture. But these are not issues of concern because these are all good for the economy. These are all positive signals for an economy of its growth. So if the labor force participation comes down because of the factors like mechanization of agriculture or more number of enrollment in the schools or an increase in the household income, these are positive signals and not issues of concern for an economy. The next reason for jobless growth was challenges related to modern services. Challenges related to modern services. With the new economic policy, the economy adopted digitalization, information technology, increased mechanization, etc. The Indian population were unfamiliar with all these things, so this also led to jobless growth in the economy. The next reason for the jobless growth in the economy was due to the losing of employment from the traditional services. For example, Indian handlooms. With the adoption of modern technology, the handloom industries lost its relevance. So these are the reasons for jobless growth in an economy. So these are the reasons for the jobless growth in the Indian economy which we have discussed now.